Hello Victorians, it's History Buff, and welcome to the second iteration of my Charters of Commerce video. Over the past few days, I've done a lot of learning about audio, how to optimize audio, and I've even set myself up with a condenser microphone. I want to say thank you to the commenters on my previous video for bringing the audio quality to my attention, and I hope you get comfortable and enjoy learning about the upcoming pack for Victoria 3. Charters of Commerce is the next mechanics pack for Victoria, and it will also coincide with a free major update. Both of these will be released in just over 2 months' time on June 17th, with more DLC, the rest of the expansion pack, being released later this year. The National Awakening pack is coming in Q3, focusing on Austria, Hungary, and the Balkans. A music pack, Songs of the Homeland, and Iberian Twilight, a Spain and Portugal pack, will both be coming to Vic 3 in Q4. Super exciting stuff happening for the game, and I for one can't wait for these packs and updates. The reworks and new features are going to be great for the game, and we're going to see why in this video. The free update will see the in-game trade system totally reworked. The devs claim that there will be a complete overhaul of trade, and that they have started over from scratch in their development of a new trade system for the game. The devs go on to give us some reasoning for this major change, mainly that trade is unreliable, overly fiddly, and most importantly, to me anyways, inherently inefficient, especially since the introduction of local prices and market access price impacts back in update 1.5. Here we are, jumping right into my current France playthrough. The way that trade works right now is relatively simple in theory. Countries establish markets and trade goods with each other through trade centers, which get built automatically in provinces. The prices of goods and services that are produced are determined and set by the ratio of buy orders to sell orders. Now, sometimes a nation will automatically set up a trade route with yours. You'll see over here in the notifications that such and such nation has started a significant trade route for X good. However, for the most part, you're going to be setting, adjusting, and even micromanaging all of these trade routes yourself, and this is where your trade routes show up. I'm sure if you've played the game, then you're familiar with this screen and the mechanics behind it. So this all seems relatively straightforward. It's just simple supply and demand, right? Well, no. Because the mechanism that administers trade in the game allows for manipulation of this system, because the pops employed by trade centers get different prices than advertised here on this screen, and are able to trade goods with each other, countries, for cheaper than the advertised market price. I'm not going to get too far into this, mainly because this system is leaving us, but this system, again, can be exploited to lead to a lot of circular trade, which I think is a good adjective that I've seen people use in forums to describe what's happening right now in the game. There are also additional drawbacks to the current system, in that it is heavily subsidized by your government in the form of convoys and ports, i.e. you have to provide them, and this is without a real return on this investment or capital that you put into building ports and supplying trade centers with convoys, unless of course you use tariffs. But we don't want tariffs. We want free trade, at least in our game, because the income from tariffs is very short-lived and should be used just as a way to direct or steer your trade. Overall, this system has led to a lot of lost profit for pops, and most importantly, untapped standard of living increases. The system is inefficient, not least because of the circular trade exploitation, but also this lost trade that occurs. Over the course of several playthroughs, I've noticed that you usually end up with a lot of small potential trade routes that aren't worth setting up or exploiting, because they don't usually grow or last very long, and honestly, it takes way too much micromanaging. As we're going to see in the next segment, the new trade system will work to address this and untap our pop's full potential. The free update will see the introduction of a new world market, although it does differ from the version that existed in Victoria 2. Pops and buildings will not buy and sell goods from this world market. This is going to be where autonomous trade takes place between nations. It's still going to be a simple supply and demand system where each good will have a world market price based on the amount of exports versus imports. The devs describe this system as a top layer above the national market. I'd like to point out here that the devs are bringing us a revamped world market and also what they call the national market, which I'm assuming will replace the current local market. Although they haven't given us much information on it yet, staying on focus with the world market for now, trade centers will still be the main driver of trade and ultimately the interface between your nation and the world market, but they will work differently. No longer will trade centers develop automatically. You're now going to have to build a center for each state, which will then give that state access to the world market in the form of trade capacity. It looks like each good will have a different trade value, and I'm also excited to build cities centered around trade centers. I don't like how they just randomly show up in certain provinces and that we have no control over them. I'm also excited to see just how the national and world markets will work and interact with each other. I'm expecting them to be a lot more dynamic, fluid, and just much more efficient. The most important thing that the devs want to point out to us is that this system will use local state prices, which means the system will no longer suffer from the deficiencies of the old system. Remember earlier when I talked about circular trade and how goods were being traded at less than market price. So I'm super excited for this. I think it's going to be a great addition to the game and really set the game up for a lot of future development and expansion. The devs go on to talk about the world market location. My understanding of this is that if you have access to the ocean, you will have access to the world market based on market areas, and that national markets will now undergo a bit of a breakdown or a deconstruction where each specific region or market area will need access to the world. So for example, if you're a landlocked country, let's say Switzerland, or if you have a colony deep in the interior of Africa, or even if you have any random province that doesn't have a port yet, you will not be able to trade on the world market with that province. The devs also state here that landlocked countries will be able to get around this deficiency via the use of the new diplomatic treaties, but I'm hoping that there will be some capacity to trade with neighboring countries without having to establish a pact or agreement. We'll have to see how the mechanic plays out, and it could definitely make for some interesting scenarios, depending on how in-depth the devs want to go with new treaties and how they interact with the current power block mechanics. For example, I'm thinking maybe you'll be able to hold a country's tradability ransom or hostage in exchange for them joining your power block or sphere of influence, or maybe other diplomatic agreements. Trade advantage is also going to be a thing now, and I like what the devs are proposing here. It's a new mechanic, and essentially it will represent the competitiveness of your market. It will be calculated at each trade center, for each good, and in each trade direction. For example, a trade center in Lancashire will have a certain amount of trade advantage for exporting fabric, which will be different from its trade advantage in exporting coal, and they will both differ from the trade advantage of importing either of these goods. Advantage will be calculated based on the amount of traded goods compared to the trade advantage of all other trade centers trading the same goods in the same direction, so either import or export. The higher a trade center's share of global trade advantage compared to its share of global trade volume, the higher its relative advantage, which in turn translates to a better price. We're also getting some new frontline military quality of life improvements and the blockade ability, which I think will be a good addition to the game. I'm interested to see just how this contrasts to the current convoy raiding mechanic that exists in the game, where you just send a fleet with an admiral to raid convoys at a certain sea node. So far, this has been what's coming in the free update as part of the general world market and trade rework. It seems like a lot of information, and it is. To rework the trade system is going to be huge for the game. And from here on out, I'm going to discuss what's actually included in the Commerce of Charters pack. First, we have company charters, which will allow you to grant special charters to companies, like a trade charter, investment charter, colony, or industry charter. These will let the company trade their goods on the world market, allow the establishment of regional headquarters that exploit the target's coffers, make it possible for a company to rule a colonial region on their own, turning them into a country in the process, and granting companies the ability to expand into producing their own goods. I'm assuming that this will be for the national companies, but I initially thought of the British East India Company and also the Hudson's Bay Company, the chartered companies, so to speak. I guess ultimately we'll have to see what this edition really changes or impacts, but I will say that I really like this edition and I'm excited for it. Good work to the devs. Company monopolies will also now be a thing. You will be able to boost the efficiency of selected buildings and grant your companies exclusive rights to certain industries. I'm interested to see how this interacts with the charter mechanic that I just discussed. More diplomatic treaties in addition to those included in the general update, negotiating fair or unequal agreements with other countries. Excited to see what this brings as well. More diplomacy is always good. And finally, we have prestige goods. I really like this idea. The devs use the example of a successful wine company being able to produce champagne, which will be an advanced variant of wine, and who knows what else we'll see. Maybe something like art, then fine art, and maybe some kind of military goods. Well everyone, that's all the information I have to give you for now for this upcoming expansion pack. I hope you really enjoyed the video with the new audio, and hope you're still here to hear this. Thank you very much again to everyone who let me know that I had to work on the audio. Hope you really enjoyed this, and I hope you stick around for more videos in the future. Thanks, have a great day.